A single dad applied for a night janitor job because it was the only shift that let him walk his daughter to school every morning. But when Billionaire CEO Claire Whitmore saw his name, her hand froze over the rejection letter. 8 years earlier, Ethan Cole had crossed Pittsburgh in the rain to return something she had lost. He never asked for money. He never knew that one quiet act would help build the company now towering above the city. That morning, Ethan stood in his worn dress shoes, wondering how many more times he could tell his daughter everything would be okay. Claire stood 42 floors above him, holding the application of the man she had never been able to find. Stay to the end, because this is not just a story about wealth or second chances. It is about what happens when integrity finally walks into the room. Like the video and tell us where you are watching from. The application was still in Claire Whitmore's hand when Ethan Cole's phone began to ring across the city. He was standing in the narrow kitchen of a rented duplex in Hazelwood, holding a screwdriver between his teeth and trying to repair the broken clasp on his daughter's backpack. Morning light pressed weakly through the blinds, turning the room the color of old paper. The refrigerator made a grinding sound every few minutes, then fell silent as if it had exhausted itself. Sophie sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and watched her father work. Her dark hair was gathered into a ponytail that leaned slightly to one side. Ethan had redone it twice already. The first attempt had been too loose. The second had looked, according to Sophie, like something had attacked her head. The phone vibrated against the counter. Ethan shifted the screwdriver into one hand and answered. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Rachel Monroe calling from Apex Current. His eyes moved toward the unpaid electric bill beneath the ceramic sugar bowl. Yes, ma'am. I'm calling regarding your application. Ethan looked down at Sophie's backpack. He had expected an email, a brief sentence thanking him for his interest, another polite rejection written by someone who had forgotten his name before pressing send. I understand, he said. There was a short pause on the other end. I don't believe you do. Ms. Whitmore would like you to return to headquarters this afternoon. Ethan stopped moving. Sophie lifted her spoon but did not take another bite. The CEO. Yes. For the janitorial position, Rachel's voice changed slightly as if she were choosing words that had not been provided by a script. She would like to speak with you personally. Ethan glanced at the clock above the stove. He had a delivery shift beginning at 6 that evening. Sophie needed to be collected from school at 3:15. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, might be willing to watch her for an hour, though Ethan already owed her for 2 afternoons the week before. What time? 2 o'clock. I can be there. When the call ended, Sophie continued staring at him. What happened? The company wants me to come back. The one with the big glass building? That one. Did they change their mind? I don't know. Sophie lowered her spoon. You look scared. I'm not scared. You are doing the thing with your jaw. Ethan relaxed his teeth. I'm thinking. That is what you say when you are scared and do not want me to know. He looked at her across the small kitchen. At 9 years old, Sophie had already learned to study the spaces between his words. She noticed when he ate only toast for dinner. She noticed when he left the grocery store without buying the coffee he had picked up. She noticed when he placed bills beneath the sugar bowl because he did not want them sitting openly on the table. Ethan had spent 3 years trying to protect her from the shape of their life. Sophie had spent 3 years quietly learning its dimensions. He picked up the repaired backpack and pressed the clasp until it clicked. There, good as new. Sophie tested it. You say that about everything, because everything deserves another chance. She slipped her arms through the straps. You wore your white shirt yesterday. I did. The man did not hire you. No. Are you going to wear it again? Ethan looked toward the bedroom. It was his only shirt suitable for an office. One cuff was beginning to fray. A faint coffee stain remained near the lowest button, though it would be hidden if he kept his jacket closed. I suppose I am. Sophie stepped closer and examined him with great seriousness. You wore that shirt to Mom's memorial. Ethan's hand stopped on the backpack strap. I also wore it to your parent-teacher conference. You spilled coffee on it. That means it has experience. A smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. For a moment, the kitchen felt warmer. Then Sophie reached into the front pocket of her backpack and handed him a folded sheet of paper. What's this? You cannot open it until after you take me to school. That sounds suspicious. It is not suspicious. It is a rule. Ethan placed the paper inside his jacket. Yes, ma'am. He walked Sophie the 6 blocks to school. The September air carried the first hint of autumn cool beneath the smell of wet pavement and traffic. Pittsburgh rose around them in layers of brick houses, narrow streets, distant bridges, and hills crowded with homes that appeared to balance on one another. Sophie held his hand at the intersections. She no longer needed to. Ethan did not mention that. At the school entrance, she turned toward him. If they ask why you want the job, do not say, because we need money. That would be honest. It would sound sad. What should I say? She considered the question. Say you are good at things. That is a very detailed answer. You are good at fixing things. You know where wires go. You can tell when a motor sounds wrong. You fixed Mrs. Patterson's heater when the repairman said she needed a new one. I cleaned a sensor. You saved her $700. She gave us lasagna. It was good lasagna. Ethan smiled. It was. Sophie stepped backward toward the doors. Tell them you are good at things. Then she disappeared inside. Ethan stood there until he saw her through the glass doors walking down the hallway with her backpack sitting straight against her shoulders. Only then did he unfold the paper. It was a drawing made with colored pencils. A tall man in a blue work shirt stood beside a building covered in windows. The man held a toolbox in one hand and Sophie's hand in the other. Above them, in careful block letters, she had written, "My dad can fix anything." Ethan folded the drawing along its original lines and returned it to the inside pocket of his jacket. 42 floors above downtown Pittsburgh, Claire Whitmore opened a black notebook she had not touched in nearly 6 months. The leather cover had softened at the corners. Water stains marked the lower edge, pale reminders of the night it had nearly disappeared. Rachel stood near the desk holding a tablet. I confirmed the photograph, she said. It is the same Ethan Cole listed in the visitor record from your old apartment. Claire turned a page. Her handwriting filled the paper in tight lines. Equations crowded the margins. Several early battery control designs had been crossed out so aggressively that the pen had nearly torn through. She remembered writing them on the floor of a rented room above a bakery that had closed the year before. The building always smelled faintly of yeast and dust. In winter, cold air came through the window frame. In summer, the room became so hot that the plastic casing on her first prototype softened beneath her fingers. She had been 28, sleeping 4 hours a night and telling herself exhaustion was temporary. Apex current had not existed then. There had been no tower, no board, no private office, and no photographs of Claire on magazine covers. There had been a folding table, a second-hand computer, and 2 engineers who had agreed to work for shares because Claire could not afford salaries. The notebook had contained everything they could not afford to lose. Circuit calculations, prototype failures, investor projections, 7 months of handwritten revisions. Most importantly, it contained the solution to a thermal regulation problem that had destroyed 3 earlier prototypes. Claire had found the answer at 2:17 in the morning after nearly giving up. The investor presentation was scheduled for 9. She took a city bus home at dawn, holding the notebook inside her bag. Somewhere between downtown and Hazelwood, she fell asleep. When she woke, she rushed off the bus and left the bag beneath her seat. She did not realize it until she reached her apartment. Claire still remembered standing in the hallway with her keys in one hand and an empty space opening inside her chest. She had called the transit office. No one had turned in the bag. She had called the bus depot. The driver had already started another route. By midnight, Claire had stopped pretending she could reconstruct the work. At 1:30, she sat on the kitchen floor with her back against a cabinet. At 3:57, someone knocked on the apartment door. Claire had opened it with a metal flashlight raised in one hand. A man stood beneath the weak hallway light soaked through from the rain. He held her black messenger bag against his chest beneath a plastic grocery sack. I think this belongs to you. For several seconds, Claire could not speak. She took the bag and opened it. The notebook was inside, dry, untouched. The man explained that he had found her address written on the first page. The bus route had ended before he reached the neighborhood, so he had walked the remaining distance. Claire emptied her wallet onto the table. $38. He looked at the money, then at her. No. You came all this way. It looked important. It is. Then keep it somewhere safer. He turned to leave. Claire followed him into the hallway. "At least tell me your name." "Ethan." The building manager later showed her the visitor log. Ethan Cole, a phone number. Claire called it 2 days later after the investor presentation. The number had been disconnected. The address she found belonged to a rooming house near the old steel district. The owner said Ethan had stayed there briefly while doing night maintenance work. He had moved without leaving a forwarding address. Claire searched for him for months. Then the first investment arrived. The company grew. The search became something she returned to between crises funding rounds, product failures, and expansion meetings. There were hundreds of men named Ethan Cole. None matched the fragments she remembered, until the photograph appeared on a janitorial application. Rachel placed another document on the desk. "This is the recording from his facilities interview." Claire pressed play. A small conference room appeared on the screen. Ethan sat at one end of a table in the same white shirt he would wear again that afternoon. Across from him sat Paul Danner, the facilities hiring manager. Paul looked at Ethan's resume. "You understand this is cleaning work?" "Yes, sir." "You have electrical maintenance listed here?" "Yes. Warehouse inventory, school facilities, delivery work, that's correct." Paul leaned back. "Why apply for janitorial the hours?" "The hours." "The shift ends at 6. My daughter's school opens at 7:30. Paul studied him. "So this is temporary." Ethan's expression remained calm. "Taking care of my daughter is permanent. The job is the part I'm flexible about." Paul tapped the resume with one finger. "You have several employment gaps. My wife died 3 years ago." Paul paused only briefly. "I'm sorry to hear that." Ethan nodded. Paul continued. "You have no supervisory experience. I supervised maintenance crews at Franklin Middle School. That is not listed as an official management title. No. It was the work they needed me to do." Paul closed the folder. "We are looking for someone with long-term ambition. I intend to work. That is not exactly what I mean. I know." The interview ended less than a minute later. Claire paused the recording. She looked at Paul's written assessment. "Lacks professional ambition, may resist authority, limited development potential." Claire's mouth tightened. "He told the truth," she said. Rachel looked at the screen. "That does not always help in interviews. No, it usually helps the interviewer decide whether they deserve authority." At 1:48 that afternoon, Ethan entered the lobby of Apex Current. He had polished his shoes with the last of an old tin of wax. The repair along the left toe remained visible if anyone looked closely. The lobby rose 3 stories above him. Steel beams from the original structure crossed beneath sheets of glass. A suspended sculpture made from copper wiring turned slowly above the reception desk. Ethan did not look at it for long. His attention moved to the ceiling vents, the emergency exits, and a faint vibration coming from an access panel beside the elevators. Rachel approached him. "Mr. Cole, yes, I'm Rachel Monroe." They shook hands. Her gaze briefly dropped toward his shoes before returning to his face. "Ms. Whitmore is ready for you." As they crossed the lobby, Ethan glanced toward the access panel. "You have a fan bearing beginning to fail." Rachel stopped. "What that sound near the elevators? I don't hear anything." "You will in a few weeks." She studied him, then pressed the elevator button. The ride to the 42nd floor took less than 30 seconds. Ethan watched the numbers climb. Rachel watched him. Most visitors reacted to the speed, the height, or the view that appeared as the elevator rose through the glass tower. Ethan seemed more interested in the brief flicker of the ceiling light when they passed the 36th floor. Claire was standing beside the windows when Rachel opened the office door. Ethan stepped inside. The city spread behind her. For a moment, neither spoke. Claire had imagined this meeting many times over 8 years. In some versions, she thanked him immediately. In others, she showed him the company and explained exactly what his kindness had created. She had never imagined him arriving in a repaired shirt to interview for a night cleaning job. Ethan recognized her slowly. His eyes moved from Claire to the black notebook on her desk. "You were in the apartment above the bakery." Claire nodded. "You brought this back to me." He looked at the notebook for several seconds. "You kept it. I built a company from it." His gaze shifted toward the windows. "I did not know. I know." Rachel quietly closed the door behind him. Claire gestured toward the chair. Ethan sat. His hands rested on his knees. "You tried to pay me," he said. "I offered you everything in my wallet, $38. You remember? You counted it twice." Despite herself, Claire smiled. I was panicking. "You looked like you had not slept in a week." I had not. Silence settled between them. It was not uncomfortable. It felt careful. Claire sat across from him rather than behind her desk. "I tried to find you." I moved. I discovered that my wife was pregnant. The rooming house was temporary. Claire noticed the way he said wife. Not former wife. Not late wife. Simply wife. "I heard what you told Paul Danner," she said softly. "I'm sorry about Anna." Ethan's expression changed. Only slightly. "Thank you." Claire looked toward the notebook. "You returned something that changed my life. I returned a bag. It was more than a bag. I did not know that." "That does not make it smaller." Ethan met her eyes. "If this meeting is about thanking me, you have thanked me. It is about the position." The janitorial position, his face became guarded. Claire explained Millstone Gardens, 5 apartment buildings constructed in the late 1960s, 386 occupied units, a failing electrical system patched by decades of repairs. Apex Current was installing solar integration, battery storage, emergency power support, and updated distribution panels. "The engineering team understands the new system," Claire said. "They understand models, load projections, and modern construction, and the buildings are not modern. No." Ethan leaned back slightly. "What do you need someone who knows what old buildings hide?" Claire slid a project summary across the table. A 30-day trial as an on-site infrastructure coordinator. You would compare the plans with the physical conditions, inspect deliveries map, undocumented modifications, and report safety discrepancies. Ethan did not touch the document. "I applied to clean offices. I know. I do not have an engineering degree. You have 14 years of maintenance experience, spread across 6 jobs, because you kept changing your schedule after your wife died." His eyes sharpened. Claire realized she had moved too close to a private wound. "I read your application," she said. "You read more than the application, yes." Ethan looked toward the old desk lamp beside her. The light dimmed almost imperceptibly as the climate system started. "You have a loose neutral connection." Claire glanced at it. "What, the lamp? It dims when the air system cycles." She watched it happen again. "You can tell that from here. It is probably sharing a damaged return path." Claire looked at him differently. Ethan noticed. "That does not make me an engineer." "No," she said. "It makes you someone who sees what the engineer who installed it missed." He finally picked up the project summary. His eyes moved carefully over the first page. "Why me? Because you have worked inside schools, warehouses, apartment buildings, and municipal facilities. Because you know that a drawing can be correct and still fail to describe what is inside a wall. That is not the whole answer." Claire did not look away. "No, the notebook matters. It made me look at your application longer than 6 seconds. And after that, your experience mattered." Ethan placed the paper on the table. "If I accept this, people will know you selected me. Yes. They will assume I was given the job because you feel indebted. Some will. And if I make a mistake, it becomes your mistake." Claire folded her hands. "I make decisions every day that become my mistakes. I am not asking you to protect yourself. What are you asking? To let me protect my name?" Something in Claire's expression softened. Ethan continued. "If I take the position, no press story about the man who returned the billionaire's notebook." "Agreed. My pay matches the work. It is not inflated to make you feel generous." "Agreed. I report through the same system as everyone else." "Agreed. If I fail, you let me fail honestly." Claire held his gaze. "Agreed." He read the first page again. "When would I start Monday?" Ethan extended his hand. Claire took it. His grip was firm and warm. For 1 second, neither released. The awareness passed between them quietly, too uncertain to name and too immediate to ignore. Ethan withdrew first. That evening, he placed the project summary on the kitchen table beside Sophie's spelling worksheet. She read the title slowly. "Infrastructure Coordinator. That is what it says. Is that better than janitor? Different? Does it pay more? Yes. Then why do you look worried?" Ethan opened the refrigerator and stared at its nearly empty shelves. "Because people are careful when they think you do not belong." Sophie waited. He closed the refrigerator. "They become dangerous when they think you were given something they deserved." She considered this with the seriousness she usually reserved for mathematics. Do you deserve it? I do not know yet. Then find out. On Monday morning, Ethan arrived at Millstone Gardens with a flashlight, a clipboard, and a canvas tool bag. 5 weathered brick buildings stood around a cracked courtyard. Laundry moved between open windows. 2 children chased a flat basketball near a playground where only one swing remained intact. Dr. Nolan Pierce met Ethan beside the site office. He wore polished shoes and held a tablet displaying the digital plans. Ethan looked past him toward a conduit line disappearing into the concrete wall of Building C. According to the plan, it should have turned west. The pipe turned east. I need the original electrical permits, Ethan said. Nolan smiled without warmth. We have current drawings prepared by licensed engineers. I need the originals. They are more than 50 years old. That is why I need them. Nolan glanced at Ethan's canvas bag. You understand your role is coordination. Ethan switched on his flashlight. Buildings do not care who licensed the drawing. Nolan's smile faded. Ethan walked toward the basement entrance. They only care what is actually inside the wall. The conduit disappeared into the wall exactly where the digital plan said it should not exist. Ethan stood beneath the basement light studying the faded metal pipe while Dr. Nolan Pierce remained near the doorway with his tablet held against his chest. The basement of Building C smelled of wet concrete rust and old detergent. Pipes crossed the ceiling in uneven layers. Some were painted red, others gray, and several had been covered so many times that their original labels had disappeared beneath thick ridges of paint. Ethan touched the conduit with the back of his fingers. A faint vibration moved through the metal. Is that line active? Nolan asked. Yes, the plan identifies it as abandoned. Ethan glanced at him. The plan is wrong. Nolan's expression tightened. You have been on the property for less than 10 minutes, and the pipe has been here for 50 years. Nolan stepped farther into the basement. Our engineering team completed a full survey before construction began. Did anyone open this wall? There was no reason to. Ethan followed the conduit until it vanished behind a row of storage cages. There is now. He took a piece of chalk from his canvas bag and marked the concrete. Nolan watched him. What are you doing giving us a place to start? By noon, Ethan had walked through 3 buildings. He did not begin with the new equipment. He began with the old systems everyone had learned to ignore. He opened utility closets where boxes of holiday decorations had been stacked against electrical panels. He photographed handwritten warnings taped inside breaker cabinets. He followed cable runs through boiler rooms and storage areas. He asked maintenance workers when the lights flickered, which elevators stalled during storms, and which walls became warm during the summer. Most of them looked surprised by the questions. One maintenance worker named Carl Jenkins had worked at Millstone Gardens for 22 years. He carried a ring of keys large enough to pull one side of his belt lower than the other. The plans say Building B has 2 main feeders, Ethan said. Carl laughed. The plans say a lot of things. How many does it have? Depends on the day. Ethan waited. Carl studied him, deciding whether the question was serious. Then he led Ethan behind the laundry room and unlocked a narrow metal door. Inside, 3 feeders entered a junction cabinet from different directions. The third had been added during an emergency repair after a fire 17 years earlier. City inspector approved it, Carl said. Where is the record? Probably in a box under somebody's desk. Ethan crouched beside the cabinet. The repair had been done cleanly, but the conduit continued upward through a wall that did not appear on the current drawings. Who knows where this goes? Carl shrugged. Old man named Pete used to know. He retired before the pandemic. Can you call him? Carl smiled for the first time. You really want to know? I do. By the end of his first day, Ethan had filled 17 pages of his notebook. He drew simple maps instead of copying the architectural plans. He marked what he could verify, circled what he could not, and left blank spaces where assumptions had replaced evidence. Elena Ruiz found him in the courtyard after the crews had gone home. She carried a cardboard box filled with resident maintenance requests. You are the new coordinator. That is what my badge says. I heard the CEO hired you herself. Ethan closed his notebook. People hear quickly around here. They have had a lot of practice. Nothing changes in these buildings without everyone knowing before management announces it. Elena set the box on a bench. She was in her early 50s, with silver beginning to show at her temples and the tired posture of someone who spent most days solving problems that had existed long before she arrived. "What are those?" Ethan asked. "Electrical complaints from the last 4 years. Why are they in a box?" The property system was replaced last spring. Half the old records did not transfer. Ethan lifted the lid. Hundreds of printed forms filled the box. Lights dimming, outlets overheating, breakers tripping, elevators stopping between floors, medical equipment switching to battery power during brief outages. "Has the engineering team seen these?" "They asked for a summary. Did you give them one? I gave them 12 pages. Ethan looked up. "What did they do with it?" "They thanked me." Elena sat beside the box. "That usually means nothing is going to happen." Ethan opened his notebook again. "Which building loses power most often?" "Building D." "Which one has the worst voltage problems?" "Building A." "Where does water enter the basements?" "All of them, but Building C is the worst," he wrote as she spoke. Elena watched him for several seconds. "No engineer asked me those questions. Engineers ask the system. And I ask the people who have to live with it." Over the next 3 days, Ethan learned the buildings by sound. Building A had a low hum inside the east wall whenever the boilers started. Building B had an elevator relay that clicked twice before engaging. Building C carried water through a cracked foundation seam after every hard rain. Building D had a distribution panel that buzzed whenever residents used too many window air conditioners. Building E appeared stable until Ethan found an undocumented grounding wire running through an abandoned storage room. He photographed everything. Each evening, he transferred his notes into the project server from the small desk assigned to him in the site trailer. Marcus Bell watched him from the other side of the room. Marcus supervised one of the installation crews. He was broad-shouldered, direct, and openly suspicious of Ethan's presence. On the second day, Marcus called him the CEO's janitor. He said it quietly enough to pretend Ethan was not meant to hear. Ethan kept typing. On the 4th morning, Marcus's crew prepared to drill through a block wall in Building B. The digital plan showed an empty chase behind the concrete. Ethan arrived as a worker lifted the rotary hammer. "Stop!" Marcus turned. "We have a schedule. There is a live feeder behind that wall." Marcus checked his tablet. "No, there is not." Ethan pointed toward a rectangular patch in the concrete. "The block pattern changes there. It was repaired after the boiler replacement in 1998. Marcus stared at him. "You were not here in 1998. "No, Carl was." Carl stood near the doorway and raised one hand. "They moved something that year. I do not remember what." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "The scan was completed last month. Scan it again. We are already behind. Then losing 10 minutes will matter less than shutting down half the building." Marcus looked at his crew. No one moved. Finally, he took a handheld scanner from a case and passed it across the wall. A warning tone sounded. Marcus adjusted the setting and scanned again. The outline of a live feeder appeared less than 2 inches behind the drilling point. Silence filled the corridor. The worker lowered the rotary hammer. Marcus stared at the wall, then at Ethan. "How did you know the patch is newer than the surrounding block? The conduit below it bends toward the wall. The old permit notes mention a boiler replacement." Marcus looked down at Ethan's canvas bag. "You carry those permits around the parts I need." Marcus handed the scanner back to the worker. "Move the drilling point." He walked past Ethan, then stopped. "Good catch. It was not an apology." It was enough. That afternoon, Ethan found the first serious discrepancy. The new battery system was designed to connect to a primary trunk line in the basement of Building C. According to the installation plan, the line could safely carry the emergency load. Ethan traced it through the basement into a utility corridor and behind an old section of drywall. The wall had been repaired after water damage. He removed a small access cover and shone his flashlight inside. The copper line had been spliced twice. The section between the splices was a smaller gauge than the rest. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. At normal demand, the wire might remain stable. Under emergency load, it would heat slowly, not enough to fail during an inspection, not enough to fail during a launch demonstration. But during a sustained outage when the battery system carried the building for hours, the splice could become dangerous. He photographed the wire, measured the gauge, and checked the temperature with a clamp meter while the building operated under normal load. Then he submitted a report. Nolan responded 46 minutes later. The variance fell within projected tolerance. No corrective action was required. Ethan read the message twice. Then he printed it, folded it, and placed it in the front pocket of his clipboard. Claire arrived at Millstone Gardens late that afternoon. She came without a photographer, a public relations team, or the group of executives who usually followed her through project sites. Elena directed her toward Building C. Claire found Ethan kneeling beside the open access cover. Dust covered the knees of his work pants. His sleeves were rolled above his forearms. A thin cut crossed one knuckle. "You know we employ people to do that," she said. Ethan looked over his shoulder. "You employ people to install the new system. And what are you doing?" Trying to understand the old one. Claire crouched beside him. The concrete floor was damp enough to darken the fabric at one knee of her suit. Ethan noticed. "You do not have to sit down. I am already here." He showed her the splice. Claire leaned closer. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved immediately. The basement seemed to narrow around them. Claire smelled faintly of rain and cedar. Ethan became aware of how close her face was to his. He shifted the flashlight toward the wire. "This middle section is smaller than the plan indicates." Claire studied it. "What happens under full load? It heats. How quickly, that depends on the demand and the temperature around it. It could last for weeks. It could last for years. It could fail the first night everyone needs it." Claire looked at him. "Nolan says it is within tolerance. Nolan has not seen it. You are certain I was here when he replied?" Claire's eyes moved toward the exposed splice. "What do you recommend? Open the wall. Replace the smaller section. Inspect the full route. How much delay? 2 days if the crew has the correct wire." Claire nodded. "Do it." Ethan closed the access cover. "Your board may not like that. My board does not live here." The answer came quickly. Too quickly to be strategic. Ethan studied her. For a moment, Claire looked less like the woman on the side of the building and more like the exhausted engineer who had once stood barefoot in a hallway holding $38. "You should have brought different shoes," he said. Claire looked down at the dust covering them. "These were expensive. They are still wrong." A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The sound surprised both of them. They walked outside together. Rain had begun falling across the courtyard. Ethan reached the parking lot and turned the key in his car. The engine clicked once. Then nothing. He tried again. Claire stood beside her vehicle beneath a black umbrella. "Battery starter. Can you fix it?" "Yes, in the rain. Yes, get in." Ethan looked at her car. "I can take the bus. It is raining. I noticed." "Ethan." He met her eyes. The way she said his name held no command, only concern. He locked his car and followed her. During the drive, Pittsburgh moved around them in wet reflections. Red brake lights stretched across the streets. Bridges rose through low clouds. Water gathered along the curb and rushed towards storm drains. Claire kept both hands on the wheel. "Rachel said you left Franklin Middle School after your wife died." Ethan looked out the window. The emergency schedule changed. They needed someone available nights and weekends. And Sophie. She was 6. She had already lost one parent. Claire waited. "I could not keep asking neighbors to raise her while I fixed other people's buildings." "Do you regret leaving?" "Sometimes I regret being tired." He watched a bus pass through the rain. "I never regret being there." Claire's fingers tightened slightly around the steering wheel. She had spent years in rooms where people spoke proudly about missing birthdays, canceling vacations, and sleeping beneath office desks. Sacrifice was treated as proof of ambition. Ethan spoke about presence as if it were a responsibility too ordinary to deserve praise. "Turn right at the light," he said. The duplex sat on a narrow street lined with old brick houses. Before Claire could stop, the front door opened. Sophie appeared on the porch wearing socks and no shoes. Ethan lowered the window. Inside. "Mrs. Patterson said your car broke." "It did." Sophie looked toward Claire. Recognition crossed her face. "You are the billionaire?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Sophie. What?" "She is." Claire smiled. "That is technically accurate." Sophie leaned closer to the open window. Did my dad fix something? Not yet. He will. Claire parked at the curb. Ethan stepped out, but Sophie remained on the porch, studying Claire with open curiosity. Rain moved across the street between them. Would you like coffee? Ethan asked. The invitation surprised him as soon as he said it. Claire looked toward the house, then at the rain. Yes. Inside the duplex was warm and small. A lamp beside the sofa flickered. Ethan removed its shade, adjusted the socket, and turned it back on without interrupting the conversation. Sophie watched Claire remove her coat. Do billionaires drink regular coffee? Yes, Dad buys the cheap kind. Sophie. It is true. Claire accepted the chipped ceramic cup Ethan handed her. It tastes fine. You have not tried it yet, Sophie said. Claire took a sip. It tastes brave. Sophie laughed. On the refrigerator, Claire noticed the drawing of Ethan holding a toolbox in Sophie's hand. Beside it was a school calendar, a grocery list, and a photograph of a woman with Sophie's eyes. Anna. The room held her absence carefully, not hidden, not displayed for sympathy, simply present. Claire saw a stack of bills beneath the ceramic sugar bowl. One envelope carried a red notice. She looked away before Ethan noticed. That restraint mattered more than either of them understood. The following week, a shipment of battery interface modules arrived for Building A. Marcus signed the delivery manifest. Ethan watched the crew open the boxes. The packaging displayed the correct model number. The metal units inside looked identical to the approved specification. Almost identical. Ethan picked up one module and turned it toward the light. One letter in the part number was different. He opened the specification file on his tablet. The delivered unit had a lower thermal tolerance, 15% lower. Building A's basement sat beside the central boiler room. During winter, the temperature remained higher than in the other buildings. During an outage, the battery system would carry increased load while the boilers continued operating. Ethan checked the invoice. Apex Current had paid for the higher-rated component. He opened a second box. The same lower-rated unit sat inside, then a third. All of them were wrong. He brought one to Nolan's temporary office. Nolan was reviewing schedules when Ethan placed the module on his desk. This is not the approved part. Nolan glanced at the number. The difference is marginal. The thermal rating is lower. The design includes safety margins. Did you run the emergency load model with this unit? Nolan returned his attention to the schedule. The system is not expected to operate at sustained maximum demand. That was not my question. Nolan looked up. You are here to coordinate site conditions. I am coordinating a site condition. You are not an engineer, Mr. Cole. Ethan placed the specification sheet beside the module. Then it should be easy for an engineer to prove me wrong. Nolan's face hardened. I will take it under review. Ethan knew what the sentence meant. He returned to the site trailer and prepared a full report. Part numbers, thermal limits, boiler room temperatures, projected emergency demand, invoices, photographs, a failure scenario written in plain language. Before submitting it, he sent a copy to his personal email. By then, the rumors had spread through the project. Some workers said Claire had hired Ethan because he had once done her a favor. Others said their connection was more personal. Paul Danner told an HR coordinator that Ethan was attempting to create problems so Claire would be forced to keep him. Grant Holloway arrived at Millstone Gardens on Wednesday afternoon. He found Ethan in the Building A basement. Grant wore a dark suit and the controlled expression of a man who entered every room knowing who held authority. This project is tied to our next financing agreement, he said. 3 investors have made continued participation dependent on an on-schedule launch. Ethan rested the module on a workbench. And delays affect more than this site. They affect whether Apex Current can complete the project at all. The wrong parts were installed. Nolan considers the difference acceptable. Nolan has not modeled them. Grant's jaw shifted. You need to understand the wider picture. Ethan looked toward the ceiling. Above them were 8 floors of occupied apartments. I do. He touched the module. I just think they are part of it. Grant followed his gaze. For a moment, something uncertain moved behind his expression. Then it disappeared. That evening, Claire asked Ethan to meet at a quiet restaurant near the river to review the report. He arrived carrying the project folder. She arrived without one. They discussed the modules first. Then the conversation moved beyond work. Claire told him she had never married. People usually love the company first, she said, or the idea of being close to it. Ethan turned his water glass slowly between his hands. Anna hated my work boots. Claire smiled. Why they left marks on the kitchen floor, you still speak about her in the present tense. Sometimes. Does that bother you? It bothers other people. Most honest things do. Their hands rested near each other beside the candle. Claire's fingers moved slightly. Ethan pulled his hand back. You are my CEO and you are an employee on a temporary contract. Neither looked away. The attraction stood between them, quiet and undeniable. Ethan closed the project folder. I should go. Claire nodded. Yes. The following morning, Ethan entered the site trailer and opened his laptop. He typed his password. A red message filled the screen. Account access temporarily suspended. He tried again. The same message appeared. Behind him, the trailer door opened. Paul Danner stepped inside. He looked at the red screen and smiled. You should have taken the janitor job. Ethan turned slowly. Paul adjusted his cuffs. At least then you would have known your place. Paul's smile remained in place. Ethan looked at the red message on his screen, then back at him. Did you request the suspension? Paul stepped farther into the trailer. I did not request anything. Human Resources received concerns from several departments. Which departments? That is part of the review. Ethan closed the laptop. What am I accused of? Paul rested one hand on the back of a chair. Working outside the limits of your position, creating unnecessary conflict with the engineering team, accessing restricted areas without proper supervision, sending technical opinions beyond the normal reporting structure. I was hired to inspect site conditions. You were hired to coordinate them. I found components that do not match the approved specification, and Dr. Pierce reviewed your concern. He dismissed it without testing the parts. Paul's expression did not change. You have been here less than a month, Mr. Cole. Dr. Pierce has spent 20 years in energy systems. The module does not know how long either of us has worked. Paul's eyes narrowed. You seem to believe being noticed by Claire Whitmore makes you untouchable. Ethan stood. I believe the wrong parts are in an occupied building. Then you have documented your opinion. It is not an opinion. That decision is above your level. Paul adjusted the cuff of his shirt. You should go home until the review is completed. How long will that take, I cannot say. My contract ends in 11 days. Then I suggest you cooperate. Paul turned toward the door. Ethan watched him leave. The trailer became quiet except for the small electric heater beneath the window. Ethan opened the laptop again. The red message had not changed. He tried the shared document folder. Access denied. He tried the delivery database. Access denied. He opened his personal email. The reports he had sent to himself were still there. Every photograph, every invoice, every temperature reading, every reply Nolan had written. Ethan downloaded the files onto a small drive from his tool bag and placed it inside the inner pocket of his jacket. Then he took his clipboard and walked outside. The morning had turned colder. Installation crews moved between the buildings carrying cable tools and sealed equipment boxes. No one stopped Ethan, but several people watched him pass. Marcus stood beside a delivery truck. You locked out. Ethan paused. How did you hear? Marcus glanced toward the site trailer. People hear quickly around here. That seems to be true. Marcus lowered his voice. Pierce told the crew not to accept instructions from you. I am not giving instructions. You found something wrong with the modules. Yes. Marcus looked toward Building A. How wrong? Wrong enough that I would not put one beside a boiler room. Marcus studied Ethan's face. You think they will fall? I think no one has done the work required to say they will not. That is not the same answer. It is the only honest one. Marcus looked down at the clipboard in Ethan's hand. What are you going to do? Finish the physical inspection. They suspended you. They suspended my server access. No one has removed me from the site. Marcus gave a brief nod. Building D crew is taking lunch at noon. The basement will be empty. Ethan met his eyes. Why are you helping me? Marcus picked up a coil of cable. Because you stopped my guy from drilling into a live feeder. He started toward the building. And because Pierce never crawled into a wall for any of us. Ethan spent the next 4 hours checking serial numbers. He wrote them by hand. Building A contained 6 lower-rated modules. Building B contained 4. Building C had not yet received its full shipment. Building D contained 3 modules with labels that appeared correct, though the adhesive around one identification plate looked newer than the metal beneath it. Ethan photographed that plate from several angles. At 1:30, his phone rang. Rachel Monroe's name appeared on the screen. "Ethan, where are you, Building D? You were asked to leave the site. Paul asked me to go home. Human Resources has not sent a removal notice." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Claire wants to speak with you. Is she there?" "She is in a board finance session." "Then she should stay in it." "That is not your decision." "No, it is hers." He stepped into an empty corridor. "What did the board say?" Rachel lowered her voice. "They are concerned about the hiring process." "Not the parts. Both." Which concern came first? Rachel did not answer. Ethan leaned against the wall. "Tell Claire I saved copies of everything. I will. And tell her the modules in Building D may have altered identification plates." There was a pause. "Altered how the label adhesive is newer than the housing. I cannot prove anything yet. I will tell her." Rachel started to end the call. "Rachel, yes. Did Claire know my access was being suspended?" "No." The answer came quickly. Ethan closed his eyes. "Thank you." He put the phone away and continued down the corridor. On the 3rd floor, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks sat outside her apartment with a portable oxygen concentrator beside her chair. A clear tube curved beneath her nose. She watched Ethan kneel near an electrical panel across the hall. "You are the man checking the new power system." Ethan stood. "Yes, ma'am." "Elena said you know old buildings. I know they rarely tell the truth the first time." Mrs. Brooks smiled. "That sounds like my first husband." Ethan glanced at the concentrator. "How long does the battery last? 4 hours if it is new." "Mine is not new." "Do you keep it charged?" "I do." "Where is your emergency outlet?" She pointed inside the apartment. Ethan followed her to a wall near the bedroom. A red outlet had been installed beside the baseboard. He tested it. The indicator light was active. "When the new system is finished, will that stay on during storms?" she asked. "That is what it is designed to do." Mrs. Brooks looked at him. "Designed to." Ethan returned the tester to his bag. "I am making sure it does." She did not ask another question. The trust in her face weighed more than any argument Paul had made. Elena found Ethan in the stairwell. "You are still here, for now. I heard they suspended you. They suspended a password. That is how it starts." Ethan looked toward the apartment behind Mrs. Brooks. "Who else depends on medical power?" Elena led him through the building. On the 5th floor, Jasmine Carter stored her son's medication in a small refrigerator connected to a backup outlet. Her son had severe asthma and a metabolic condition that required injections kept at a stable temperature. On the 7th floor, an older man used an electric lift to move from his bed to a wheelchair. In Building B, 2 residents used breathing machines at night. In Building E, a woman recovering from surgery slept in a powered medical chair because she could not lie flat. The project documents described essential load. Elena showed Ethan the people hidden inside that phrase. By the time he left Millstone Gardens, the sun had begun to lower behind the buildings. He drove home with the heater off to save fuel. Sophie sat at the kitchen table doing division problems when he entered. She looked at his face. "They fired you." "Not yet." "That means maybe." "That means there is a review." "Is a review when people decide if they believe you?" "Sometimes." "Do they?" Ethan removed his jacket. "I do not know." Sophie pushed her worksheet aside. "Did you do something wrong?" "No." "Did someone else? I think so." "Then why are they reviewing you?" Ethan opened the refrigerator. A jar of mustard, half a carton of milk, and 2 eggs sat inside. He closed it again. "Because the person who points at a problem is easier to move than the problem." Sophie frowned. "That is stupid." "It can be." His phone rang before he could begin dinner. Claire's name appeared. Ethan stepped onto the back porch. Cold air pressed against his shirt. "I heard they suspended your access," Claire said. "Yes, I did not authorize it, I know." "Rachel told you." "She did." Claire exhaled. "The board believes I created a conflict by hiring you directly." "You did." The honesty caught her off guard. "I expected you to disagree. You saw my application because of the notebook. You offered me a role no one else interviewed for. That created a conflict. I offered it because you were qualified. Both things can be true." Claire stood alone in her office, looking across the city. "The board wants Nolan's assessment to control the technical decision. Nolan has not tested the modules." I know. Then why are they listening to him? Because he has credentials, a formal title, and 15 years of documented project authority. And I have a part number. Claire closed her eyes. Yes. Ethan rested one hand on the porch railing. What do you need evidence they cannot dismiss as your judgment against his? I gave you the invoices and specifications. They say the difference falls within the design margin. Without a model. I know. Then order one. I did. Nolan says it will take 10 days. The launch is in 12. I know that too. The frustration in her voice softened something in Ethan. He had been angry at the company. It was easier when Claire stood outside it. But she did not. She sat at the center of it, powerful enough to affect almost everything and still surrounded by structures that could delay the truth until it became convenient. I am going back tomorrow, he said, to the site. Yes, human resources may remove you. Then they will remove me. Claire looked toward the black notebook on her desk. I brought you into this. I accepted. I should have protected the reporting structure. You should have read the culture before putting me inside it. The words landed hard. Claire did not defend herself. You are right. Silence moved between them. From inside the house, Sophie laughed at something on television. Claire heard the sound through the phone. I am sorry, she said. For what? For asking you to trust a company that learned how to protect itself from people like you. Ethan looked through the kitchen window at Sophie. People like me. People who make everyone uncomfortable by refusing to look away. The next morning, Grant Holloway met Ethan outside Building A. Grant had no assistant with him, no folder, no prepared notes. I want to speak privately. They entered the basement. The boiler system filled the room with dry heat. New battery cabinets stood along the opposite wall, clean and silent against stained concrete. Grant removed his coat. I read the summary of your report. The summary is not the report. I understand that. Did you read the full version? Grant looked at the cabinets. Not yet. Why? Because Nolan reviewed the technical concern. That is not why. Grant's eyes moved toward Ethan. You want a simple answer. I want an honest one. Grant took a slow breath. Every day this project is delayed, Apex Current loses leverage with 3 institutional investors. Their funding supports 7 other projects. If Millstone fails publicly, those projects may collapse with it. The modules are wrong. I am not disputing the part number. You are disputing what it means without reading the report. I am weighing the judgment of our lead engineer against mine. Yes, at least say it clearly. Grant's voice became colder. You have no degree, no engineering license, and no formal authority to stop this installation. Ethan stepped toward the nearest cabinet. And when Mrs. Brooks loses oxygen during an outage, will your investors explain the difference to her? Grant's jaw tightened. That is emotional manipulation. No, she lives on the 3rd floor. Grant looked toward the ceiling. Ethan continued. You keep calling this a financing problem. It is only a financing problem from up there. He pointed toward the apartments above them. Down here, it is a heat limit printed on a metal housing. You are confusing moral certainty with operational responsibility, and you are confusing a deadline with permission. Neither man spoke. The boiler cycled behind them. A low vibration moved through the floor. Grant put on his coat. I am asking you to step away until the review is finished, and I am asking you to read 4 pages. Grant stopped at the door. His hand remained on the handle. Then he left without answering. Claire came to Ethan's house that evening. He opened the door and stared at her. You cannot keep appearing here whenever your company corners me. I called. I did not answer. That is why I came. You are the reason they think I have special access. Claire looked toward the street. Her car was parked half a block away. I came alone. That does not make it invisible. Sophie stood in the hallway behind him, holding a desk lamp with a loose cord. Claire noticed her and lowered her voice. I need to know exactly what you found in Building D. Ethan stepped aside. She entered. The kitchen light cast a soft circle across the table. Ethan placed photographs in front of her. The identification plates may have been replaced. Claire studied the enlarged image. What makes you think that the adhesive line is clean? The housing has oxidation around it. The plate was attached after the unit had already aged. Can that be proven with the physical module, which is controlled by the contractor? Yes. Claire sat back. The board meets Friday. They want me removed. Grant requested it, and I have not agreed. Ethan looked at her across the table. Believing me in this kitchen does not help anyone in those buildings. I need evidence the board cannot explain away. I gave you evidence. You gave me enough to know we need more. His hands flattened against the table. He had not realized they were shaking until Claire looked at them. She reached forward, then stopped before touching him. I am sorry I brought you into this. You did not bring me into anything. I signed the contract. I should have made sure your reports could not be buried. You assumed your company worked the way it claimed to work. Yes. And now Claire looked at the photographs. Now I know it works the way frightened people make it work. Ethan's anger weakened, not because the problem had changed, because she had stopped trying to stand above it. She rose from the table. He stood with her. They were close enough that Ethan could see the tiredness beneath her eyes. Claire's voice dropped. I believe you. He looked at her mouth, then back at her eyes. You should go, I know. Neither moved. The distance between them became smaller without either person taking a step. Ethan could feel the warmth of her hand near his. Claire lifted her face slightly. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Sophie entered holding the lamp. Bad time Ethan stepped back. Claire looked toward the lamp. What happened to it? The cord sparks. Ethan took it from her. That is not something you carry through the house. I unplugged it. Claire reached for her coat. I should leave. Sophie watched her. Are you mad at my dad? No. Is he mad at you? Claire glanced at Ethan. A little. Sophie nodded. That happens when he cares. Ethan closed his eyes. Sophie. Claire almost smiled. Then she left. The storm arrived 3 nights later. Rain struck Pittsburgh in heavy sheets, filling gutters and turning streets into dark streams. Millstone Gardens had survived storms before, but its drainage system had been patched too many times and maintained too rarely. At 1:15 in the morning, water entered the lower level of Building C. At 1:40, a ventilation fan near the interface cabinet shut down after moisture reached its control relay. The basement temperature rose. At 2:26, the old grid failed across several blocks. The new battery system shifted into emergency load. One lower-rated module began heating faster than the control software expected. At 2:41, voltage became unstable. An auxiliary breaker tripped. 3 floors went dark. Mrs. Brooks's oxygen concentrator switched to its internal battery. Jasmine Carter woke to the alarm on her son's medical refrigerator. The hallway emergency lights failed for 11 minutes. At 6:12, Elena called Ethan. Her voice sounded flat with exhaustion. We lost backup power in Building C. He sat up in bed. How long? 11 minutes. Was anyone hurt? No. Not yet. He heard movement in the hall. Sophie was awake. What failed? The contractor says the auxiliary panel. Did they pull the sensor log? They are sending someone. When? This morning. Ethan looked at the clock. Do not let anyone remove the interface module. I do not have authority to stop them. Lock the basement if you have to. At 6:30, Claire called. Grant submitted a formal request to remove you from the project. Ethan pulled on his work pants. Did you approve it? No. Did Nolan blame me for the outage? He said you accessed the auxiliary panel 2 weeks ago. I photographed the grounding connections. The report is in the folder they removed. I found a copy. Good. Claire's voice became quieter. Tell me exactly what you touched. He did. Every panel, every cover, every connection. Did you alter anything? No. Are you certain the lower-rated module could have caused this? Yes. Could have. I need the sensor log to prove it did. Your badge may be disabled. Elena will let me in. If you return, they may accuse you of contaminating evidence. If I do not, the contractor may remove the evidence before an independent inspector sees it. Claire said nothing. Ethan pulled Anna's old watch from a drawer. The leather strap was worn smooth. I cannot order you to go, Claire said. I understand. But unaltered sensor data collected before the contractor arrives would matter. That sounds close to an order. It is not. What is it? Claire looked at the dark windows of her office. Trust. Ethan fastened the watch around his wrist. When he entered the kitchen, Sophie was waiting. Are you going to lose your job? Probably. Did you break the building? No. Did you tell the truth? Yes. She looked at Anna's watch. Mom used to say being scared does not make you wrong. Ethan picked up his tool bag. No. He knelt in front of her. It means the choice costs something. He drove through the rain. Water moved across the road in silver waves. At Millstone Gardens, Elena opened the side gate. The basement of Building C smelled of wet concrete and hot metal. Water dripped from the ceiling. Ethan opened the interface cabinet. The sensor display was still active. A sharp temperature rise appeared in the minutes before the outage. Then he saw the identification plate. One edge had lifted away from the housing. Beneath it, a different serial number had been scratched into the metal. Someone had not simply delivered the wrong part. Someone had tried to hide it. Headlights swept across the basement windows. A contractor's truck stopped outside. Ethan raised his phone and began recording. The contractor's headlights moved across the basement windows and disappeared behind the concrete pillars. Ethan kept his phone steady. The sensor display showed a sharp rise in temperature beginning 14 minutes before the outage. The module had crossed its rated limit, reduced its output, then sent unstable voltage through the auxiliary circuit. He recorded the entire screen. Time, temperature, load, voltage. Every number matched the failure sequence he had described in his report. Elena stood near the basement door with a flashlight. "How much time do you need?" 10 minutes. You have 5. A truck door slammed outside. Voices crossed the courtyard. Ethan connected a cable from the sensor port to his phone and began exporting the complete log. A progress bar appeared. 12%. The metal cabinet was still warm beneath his hand. He photographed the loose identification plate again. One corner had lifted enough to reveal the original serial number scratched into the housing. The number did not match the invoice. It did not match the shipping record. It belonged to a lower-rated production series manufactured almost 2 years earlier. Ethan placed the approved specification beside the module and took another photograph. 28%. Someone pulled at the basement door. Elena Ruiz. A man called from the other side. "Open this door." Elena did not move. "Who is that?" Ethan asked. "Wesley Crane, contractor project manager." The handle shook again. "Elena, this equipment belongs to the contractor." She looked at the oxygen outlet panel on the wall. "It is inside my building." The export reached 43%. Ethan opened his email and attached the photographs he had already taken. The signal in the basement was weak. The message remained unsent. "Can you get closer to a window?" he asked. Elena took his phone and held it near the narrow glass panel above the utility sink. One signal bar appeared. The message began uploading. Outside, Wesley raised his voice. "You are interfering with an active investigation." Elena looked toward the door. "No, I am waiting for one to begin." A second vehicle entered the courtyard. Marcus Bell stepped into view through the basement window. He was wearing a heavy coat over his work clothes. Elena unlocked the door just far enough to let him inside, then secured it again. "What did you find?" Marcus asked. Ethan pointed toward the module. Marcus examined the lifted label. "That is not factory work. No. You need a witness. That is why I called you." Marcus took out his phone and began recording. He stated the date and time, then filmed the cabinet from the doorway before approaching it. "The module has not been removed," he said. "The cabinet is in the same condition it was in when I arrived. The data export reached 76%. Wesley struck the door with the side of his fist. "Marcus, open it." Marcus looked toward Ethan. "I guess he saw my truck. You do not have to stay." Marcus kept recording. "Yes, I do." At Apex Current Head, Claire entered the boardroom at 7:26. Pittsburgh remained dark beyond the glass. Rain blurred the city into gray lights and black water. 7 board members sat around the long table. Grant Holloway was already there. Paul Danner sat near the wall beside an attorney from Human Resources. Dr. Nolan Pierce appeared on a large screen at the far end of the room. Rachel followed Claire inside and placed a folder beside her chair. Claire remained standing. "Before we begin, I want confirmation that every document related to Millstone Gardens has been preserved." Grant looked up. "The project records are under standard retention." "That was not my question." The board attorney answered. "A legal hold was issued 30 minutes ago." Claire sat. "Good." Sandra Walsh, the longest-serving board member, looked toward Grant. "You requested this meeting. Present your recommendation." Grant opened the folder in front of him. His materials were arranged with the precision Claire had come to expect from him. Every page carried a numbered tab. Every claim had been reduced to language that sounded reasonable before anyone examined what it concealed. Grant began with Ethan's hiring. He described the process as irregular. He noted that Ethan had not competed against other candidates for the infrastructure position. He explained that Claire had a personal history with him that had not been disclosed to the board before his appointment. He did not call the relationship romantic. He did not need to. The possibility already existed in the room. Grant continued. Ethan had submitted technical concerns beyond his defined authority. He had challenged the lead engineer in front of installation staff. He had retained copies of project documents on a personal account. He had continued site activity after his server access was suspended. He had previously opened the auxiliary cabinet connected to the overnight failure. "Are you saying he caused the outage?" Sandra asked. Grant paused. "I am saying the possibility cannot be excluded until the investigation is complete." Claire watched him. "You read his report." Grant did not look at her. I reviewed the executive summary. That was not my question. The room became still. Grant placed both hands on the table. "I read the full report last night." "When after the outage?" Claire allowed the silence to remain. Howard Keene, a board member representing one of the early investment groups, leaned forward. "What did the report say?" Grant glanced toward Nolan's image on the screen. It stated that the installed modules had lower thermal tolerances than the approved units. It described a possible failure during emergency load if basement temperature increased. Howard looked toward the windows. "That sounds similar to what happened last night." Nolan spoke quickly. "The cause of the outage has not been established. The auxiliary panel may have failed because of moisture exposure, improper access, or an unrelated breaker defect." Claire turned toward the screen. "Did you inspect the lower-rated module after Ethan's first report no physical inspection was required? Did you run a thermal model using the installed part? The design already included sufficient margin. Did you run the model?" Nolan's mouth tightened. "No." "Did you inspect the module after Ethan submitted photographs of the altered identification plate? That report was received outside normal procedure." Claire looked down at the folder Rachel had placed beside her. "Nolan, the report was submitted through the project server. It was later forwarded directly to your office, after you closed it." Nolan shifted in his chair on the screen. "I exercised engineering judgment." Claire's phone vibrated against the table. A message from Ethan appeared. "Evidence package uploading, weak signal. Sensor log confirms thermal event. Original serial number hidden under replacement plate." Claire did not open the attachment yet. Grant continued his presentation. He explained the financing risk. 3 investors had tied future participation to an on-schedule launch. A public delay could affect 7 additional projects. Hundreds of employees and thousands of future customers depended on the company maintaining confidence. His voice remained measured. No threats, no exaggeration, only consequences arranged carefully enough to make safety sound like one concern among many. When he finished, Sandra looked toward Claire. "Your response." Claire opened Ethan's message. The first photograph showed the module inside the cabinet. The second showed the approved specification. The third showed the lifted identification plate. The fourth showed the original serial number beneath it. The sensor log appeared as a spreadsheet with temperature and load readings taken every 30 seconds. Claire passed the phone to Rachel. "Put this on the screen." Nolan's image disappeared. The module photograph filled the wall. Paul Danner stopped writing. Grant looked at the serial number. His posture changed almost imperceptibly. Claire stood. "This evidence was recorded this morning in Building C." She enlarged the image. "This is the identification plate visible during standard inspection. This is the original serial number beneath it." Howard leaned toward the screen. "The plate was replaced. That is what an independent examiner will determine." Rachel displayed the specification and invoice side by side. "Apex Current paid for the higher-rated module," Claire said. "The installed unit belongs to a lower-rated production series." The next image showed the temperature graph. The module exceeded its operating limit 14 minutes before the outage. It reduced output. Voltage became unstable. The auxiliary breaker opened 11 seconds later. Sandra looked toward Grant. "How long ago was this risk reported?" Claire answered. 22 days. No one spoke. Howard turned to Nolan, whose image now appeared in a smaller window beside the data. You received this concern 22 days ago. I received a field observation from an employee without engineering authority. Did the field observation identify the correct part number? Yes. Did it identify the correct thermal limit? Yes. Did it predict the type of event shown on this graph? Nolan hesitated. Broadly. Howard sat back. Then his title appears irrelevant. Paul moved in his chair. The issue before us is not only the technical report. Mr. Cole violated information security policy by sending company records to a private account. Claire looked at him. Who suspended his server access? Paul's face remained neutral. Human Resources acted after receiving departmental concerns. Who approved the suspension? It was an administrative action. Who approved it? Paul glanced toward the attorney. The attorney did not help him. I did. Who requested it? Dr. Pierce submitted a concern. Was Grant copied? Paul looked toward Grant. Yes. Claire turned to Grant. You knew Ethan's access had been restricted. Yes. You knew he had reported substituted components. Yes. You had not read the full report. No. And you allowed his access to remain suspended. Grant looked at the graph on the screen. Yes. The admission had no defense attached to it. That made it heavier. In the Millstone basement, the data export reached 100%. Ethan saved 3 copies. One went to Claire. One went to Elena. One went to a secure storage service linked to his personal account. Marcus continued filming. Wesley's voice came through the door. The police are on their way. Elena folded her arms. Good. Ethan disconnected the cable. We need to preserve the module. Marcus looked toward the cabinet. If we remove it, they can say we damaged it. If we leave it, Wesley may take it. Elena checked the courtyard through the window. City Housing sent an inspector after the complaints last night. She is 12 minutes away. Wesley struck the door again. You are trespassing, Ethan. Ethan looked around the basement. I signed in. Your access was suspended. My server access was suspended. You have no authority over this equipment. Ethan stepped toward the door. Then you should be comfortable waiting for the inspector. Silence followed. Then Wesley spoke more quietly. You are destroying your career over a replaceable part. Ethan looked back at the cabinet. Mrs. Brooks is not replaceable. Wesley pulled at the handle. The old lock shifted in its frame. Marcus lowered his phone. That door will not hold. Elena moved toward a storage shelf and pulled a steel bar from behind it. She placed the bar through the inner handles. Now it will. Ethan looked at her. Do you keep that there? I manage 5 old buildings. The outer door opened several inches before the bar caught. Wesley's face appeared through the gap. His expensive raincoat was dark with water. This is contractor property. Ethan lifted his phone. You are being recorded. Wesley's eyes moved from Ethan to Marcus, then to the open cabinet. You accessed the system after an electrical event. Any data you collected is compromised. The sensor log is internal. You could have altered it. The export includes a digital signature. Wesley's gaze changed. Only for a second. But Ethan saw it. The man knew what the data would show. You need to hand me the module, Wesley said. No, you do not understand the liability you are creating. I understand it better every minute you stand there. A siren sounded beyond the courtyard. Wesley looked over his shoulder. A city vehicle stopped near the entrance. Elena removed the steel bar. Now we can open the door. The city housing inspector entered with a police officer and a representative from the fire department. Ethan stepped away from the cabinet. He described exactly what he had touched. He gave them the original photographs. Marcus provided his recording. Elena confirmed the condition of the basement when Ethan arrived. Wesley objected to every step. The inspector listened, then ordered the cabinet sealed. The module would remain in place until an independent electrical examiner arrived. For the first time that morning, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. Back in the boardroom, Claire displayed Marcus's recording. Wesley's demand for the module played through the speakers. So did his claim that the data was compromised before he had seen it. Sandra watched the screen without blinking. Howard closed the folder in front of him. This is no longer an employment dispute. No, Claire said. It is not. Grant stared at the altered serial number. Claire had seen him under pressure many times. He usually became more certain. He reduced uncertainty into number schedules and controlled decisions. Now something had broken through that certainty. He looked toward the board. My responsibility was to protect this company from avoidable risk. No one interrupted. I treated the person identifying the risk as if he were the risk. Paul turned toward him. "Grant, the review is not complete." Grant ignored him. I received Ethan's report. I accepted Nolan's summary because it supported the timeline I believed we needed. I did not read the full document until after the outage. He looked at Claire. That was a failure of oversight. Claire held his gaze. It was not an apology. Not yet. But it was the first time he had stopped hiding behind process. Howard asked the question everyone had avoided. "What are you proposing?" Claire returned to her seat. "Immediate suspension of the launch." Paul inhaled sharply. Claire continued. "Independent inspection of every installed interface module across all 5 buildings. Preservation of contractor, supplier, and server records. Removal of Nolan's sign-off authority until the review is complete. A legal hold on all communications related to Ethan's reports. Direct notification to Millstone residents before any public statement." Sandra looked toward the financial projections. "What happens to the funding agreement? We may lose it." "How much?" "Up to $40 million in committed capital." The number remained in the room. Howard looked toward the image of Millstone Gardens on the far screen. "And if we launch," Claire answered without hesitation. "We activate a system containing parts we know may fail." Grant folded his hands. "I support the suspension." Paul turned toward him. "You cannot be serious." Grant's voice stayed calm. "I am." Sandra looked at Claire. "And Ethan Cole. His access will be restored. His contract will remain active. He will report directly to the Independent Safety Committee during the investigation." Paul began to speak. Claire stopped him. "You will have no involvement in that process." The board voted. 6 supported the suspension. 1 opposed it. Howard cast the opposing vote only because he wanted the review expanded to include all report classification changes during the previous 6 weeks. Claire added the condition. The revised vote passed unanimously. By the time the meeting ended, the rain had weakened. Claire left the tower without changing clothes. Rachel drove her to Millstone Gardens. They found Ethan outside Building C, speaking with the city inspector. His shirt was wet through the shoulders. A cut across his palm had begun bleeding again. Claire waited until the inspector walked away. Ethan looked at her. "What did the board decide? The launch is suspended." His face did not show relief. "And the modules, every unit will be inspected by an independent firm." Wesley locked out of the site. Ethan looked toward the residents gathered beneath the covered entrance. "They need to hear it from the company. They will. Not a press release. No." Claire stepped closer. "You were right." Ethan looked at the sealed basement door. "I wanted to be wrong." She noticed the blood on his hand. "You are hurt. It is nothing." Claire took a first aid packet from the emergency station beside the entrance. Ethan began to refuse. She gave him a look. He held out his hand. Claire cleaned the cut carefully. Residents moved through the lobby around them. Elena spoke with the inspector. Marcus stood near the door, still holding his phone. There was no privacy. Still, the moment felt separate from everything around it. Claire wrapped the bandage around Ethan's palm. "I almost lost the company this morning," she said. "Did you?" "I do not know yet." "Are you sorry?" Claire looked up at him. "No." Ethan's fingers closed gently around hers. "Then whatever you lost was not the company you wanted to keep." Claire remained close. The space between them held everything they had refused to say. Fear, relief, anger, trust. She wanted to kiss him. Ethan saw it. He wanted the same thing. But Mrs. Brooks stood only a few feet away with her oxygen concentrator beside her, watching the sealed basement door. Ethan released Claire's hand. "Talk to them first." Claire followed his gaze. "Yes." She gathered the residents in the community room. There was no microphone, no company logo, no prepared statement. Claire stood in front of folding chairs and told them the launch had been suspended because installed components might not meet the promised safety standard. She told them an employee had raised concerns and the company had failed to respond quickly enough. She did not mention Ethan's name until Mrs. Brooks did. "That employee is standing in the back," she said. Everyone turned. Ethan lowered his eyes. Claire looked at him across the room. "Yes," she said. "He is." That evening, Claire and Ethan sat alone on the steps outside Building C. The rain had stopped. Water ran along the curb. "You could lose the funding," Ethan said. "I could. And the other projects, we will have to restructure them. You chose this quickly." "No." Claire looked toward the dark windows. "I chose it late." Ethan studied her profile. She looked tired enough to be honest. "What happens now?" "The audit begins tomorrow." His phone vibrated. Claire's phone rang at the same time. They looked at each other. Claire answered. The independent examiner spoke for less than a minute. Her expression changed as she listened. When the call ended, Ethan waited. "They inspected 12 modules before sealing the building," she said. "How many were wrong?" 9. Ethan looked toward the basement. Claire continued. 7 had altered identification plates. All 9 were invoiced as the higher-rated model. The quiet around them deepened. "That is not a shipping error," Ethan said. "No." Claire looked at the building where hundreds of residents were preparing for another night on the old electrical system. "It is fraud." Fraud changed the shape of the problem. Until that moment, Claire had believed Apex Current was dealing with carelessness, pride, and a chain of people who had chosen convenience over inspection. Fraud meant someone had made the danger deliberate. The independent audit began before sunrise the next morning. Every installation crew was removed from Millstone Gardens. The basement cabinets were sealed. Delivery records, invoices, server logs, and contractor emails were copied onto systems controlled by an outside legal team. Claire ordered temporary generators for all 5 buildings. Priority outlets were installed for residents with medical equipment. Refrigerated medicine was moved onto protected circuits. Elena received a direct emergency number that bypassed the company switchboard and rang 3 people at once. Ethan spent the first day beside the auditors. He did not touch the equipment. He stood at a folding table in the Building A basement and answered questions while inspectors opened each cabinet. They checked part numbers, they measured thermal ratings, they photographed labels, they compared serial numbers against the manufacturer database. By noon, the pattern was no longer difficult to see. Boxes had arrived with the correct model printed on the outside. The modules inside were cheaper units from an older production series. Some identification plates had been replaced. Others had been altered with adhesive labels printed to resemble factory markings. All of the invoices charged Apex Current for the approved premium components. Marcus stood near Ethan as another false plate peeled away beneath an inspector's tool. "How many?" Marcus asked. 11 so far, out of 14 inspected. Marcus looked toward the ceiling. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Ethan said nothing. He had spent weeks wondering whether he was overreacting. He had examined the same numbers at night while Sophie slept in the next room. He had listened to people with more authority tell him the difference was small. Now each opened cabinet returned the same answer. He had been right. It did not feel like victory. It felt like standing beside a bridge after discovering someone had removed the bolts. Claire arrived near noon. She had changed into dark trousers, work shoes, and a plain gray coat. There were no cameras waiting for her. Rachel carried no prepared statement. Claire stopped beside Ethan. "How many?" 11 incorrect units. 3 correct. She watched an inspector photograph another altered serial plate. "Has anyone identified where the substitution happened?" "Not yet." Ethan looked at her. Someone had access to the packaging before the shipment reached this site. The supplier, or the contractor warehouse. Claire nodded. Her face remained composed, but Ethan saw the exhaustion in the way she held her shoulders. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "For 40 minutes in the car. That does not count. It counted this morning." Ethan almost smiled. Claire looked toward the auditors. "I have to meet the residents at 4. They are angry. They should be. You do not have to answer every question today." "Yes, I do." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Will you be there?" Ethan looked across the basement. "You do not need me standing beside you." "I know." The answer was quiet. "I am asking anyway." He held her gaze. "I will be there." At 4 o'clock, folding chairs filled the Millstone Gardens Community Gymnasium. Residents stood along the walls and gathered near the doors. Parents held children on their laps. Older people sat with coats still buttoned because the temporary heating system had not reached every room. Claire entered without an introduction. No one applauded. Elena stood beside her. Ethan remained near the back, close enough to hear, but far enough that no one could mistake the meeting for a celebration. Claire faced the room. "My name is Claire Whitmore. I am the chief executive of Apex Current." A man near the front folded his arms. "We know who you are." Claire nodded. "You were promised a safe electrical system. My company installed equipment that did not meet the approved standard." Voices moved through the room. Claire continued. "An employee reported the problem. His warnings were not handled with the seriousness they deserved. The launch has been canceled until every component is inspected and replaced." A woman raised her hand. "How long I do not know yet. You expect us to trust that no?" The room quieted slightly. Claire looked across the faces in front of her. "I do not expect trust because I am asking for it. We will have to earn it through what we do next." She explained that temporary medical power would remain available. Independent inspectors would stay on the property. Apex Current would pay for replacement equipment, resident support, and third-party monitoring. No tenant would be charged. No repair costs would be transferred to the property. A man near the side aisle called out, "Who did this? The investigation is still active. That means nobody is responsible." "No," Claire said. "It means I will not name someone before there is evidence, but I can name the person responsible for Apex Current's response." She placed one hand against the back of the empty chair beside her. "I am." Ethan watched the room. Some residents remained angry. Some looked surprised. No one softened simply because Claire accepted blame. That was not why she had done it. Mrs. Brooks sat in the front row with her oxygen concentrator beside her. She lifted one hand. "Is the man who found the problem still working for you?" Claire looked toward Ethan. Every face followed her gaze. "Yes." Mrs. Brooks turned slightly in her chair. "Come up here." Ethan hesitated. Elena gave him a small nod. He walked to the front of the room. Mrs. Brooks looked up at him. "Tell us whether the temporary system is safe." Claire moved aside. Ethan faced the residents. "The generators are working. The protected outlets have been tested. The medical circuits have separate monitoring." "Is that a yes?" someone asked. "For the temporary system, yes. And the new one? Not until every unit is inspected, replaced, and tested under full emergency load." A father holding a sleeping child asked, "Would you let your daughter live here right now?" The question struck harder than any accusation. Ethan looked toward the ceiling, toward the floors of apartments above them. With the temporary medical support in place, yes. He paused. "But I would not activate the permanent system until I had seen every test myself." The father nodded once. It was not approval. It was recognition. After the meeting, Claire remained in the gymnasium until the last resident had spoken to her. Some shouted, some asked quiet questions. One woman cried because her refrigerator had failed during the outage and she feared her son's medicine had become unsafe. Claire arranged for a medical replacement before leaving the room. Ethan waited near the door. When the gymnasium was finally empty, Claire sat on the edge of the small stage. She removed her shoes and pressed her palms against her eyes. Ethan approached. "You answered them. I did not answer enough. You answered what you knew. That does not feel like enough. It usually does not." Claire lowered her hands. "Are they going to trust us again? I do not know." She looked at him. "You said us." Ethan realized he had. Before he could respond, Rachel entered carrying a folder. The audit team found something. Claire put her shoes back on. They returned to the site office. The folder contained copies of internal emails from the contractor. Wesley Crane had approved the use of lower-rated modules 3 months earlier. The Millstone project had exceeded its installation budget after unexpected structural repairs. Replacing damaged conduit had cost more than the contractor predicted. Wesley needed to recover the loss without reporting another delay. A supplier employee named Derek Sloan offered older modules at a reduced price. The invoice would still show the approved units. The difference would be divided between a shell consulting company and 2 contractor accounts. The first email described the substitution as temporary. A later message instructed workers to replace the identification plates before delivery. Another warned that a field inspection could reveal the serial numbers. Claire read the pages in silence. Grant arrived while she was still reading. He closed the office door behind him. "I approve the contractor's budget adjustment," he said. Claire looked up. Did you know about the substitutions? No. Did you ask how they recovered the cost? No. Why Grant stood across from her? Because they promised the launch date would hold. Ethan remained beside the window. Grant did not look at him. Claire placed the emails on the desk. The date was purchased with counterfeit safety records. Yes. You made the pressure possible. Grant's face tightened. I did. Claire waited for an explanation. None came. Grant continued. I spent 20 years protecting companies from being wrong. Somewhere in that process, I started treating protection as the goal. He looked toward Ethan. I read your report when it first reached me. Ethan's expression did not change. You said you read it after the outage. I read part of it before. Claire's eyes sharpened. How much? Enough to understand that Nolan should inspect the modules. The room became still. Grant placed both hands on the back of a chair. I told myself the thermal difference was within the design margin. I told myself Nolan's judgment was sufficient. I told myself an inspection would create a delay we could not afford. You knew it needed one, Ethan said. Grant met his eyes. Yes. Then you chose not to know. Grant absorbed the words. Yes. Claire stood. You are suspended from financial oversight of Millstone Gardens, effective immediately. Grant nodded. You will provide every communication related to the contractor supplier and funding timeline. I already have. You will cooperate with the outside review. I will. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then leave. Grant picked up his coat. At the door he stopped. I am sorry. Claire did not answer. Grant turned toward Ethan. The words seemed harder now. I am sorry. Ethan looked at him. Help them find everything. Grant nodded and left. The investigation continued for 16 days. 23 substituted modules were found across the 5 buildings. 17 had altered identification plates. 6 had been placed inside correct boxes with no label change because the contractor assumed no one would open the packaging after delivery. The records led to Wesley Crane, Derek Sloan, and a subcontractor accountant who had created the false consulting invoices. All 3 were referred for criminal investigation. The contractor terminated Wesley. The supplier placed Derek on leave before canceling his employment. Federal investigators requested the invoicing records. Nolan lost his sign-off authority on the 2nd day of the audit. He defended his decisions until the independent engineering report was released. The report stated that Ethan's initial warning had been technically accurate, specific, and sufficient to require immediate physical inspection. It also stated that Nolan had dismissed the concern without completing the basic verification expected of a lead engineer. Nolan resigned before the board completed its review. Paul Danner remained confident until investigators opened the server records. The log showed that Paul had changed the classification of Ethan's report from urgent safety concern to personnel dispute. He had described Ethan as emotionally unstable despite never speaking to him after the first interview. He had requested the suspension of Ethan's access 2 hours after receiving a call from Wesley Crane. Paul claimed the call concerned scheduling. The contractor's records showed it concerned the module report. Apex Current dismissed him for manipulating safety procedures and misrepresenting employment records. Grant remained suspended while the board reviewed his conduct. He provided every document requested. He did not delete messages. He did not blame Nolan. He did not attempt to reduce his responsibility. Claire argued against immediate termination. Not because she had forgiven him, because the investigation found no evidence that he had profited from the fraud or known the parts were being deliberately disguised. His failure had been different. He had been warned. He had chosen the explanation that protected the schedule. The board retained him in a reduced role with no independent authority over safety decisions. Every future project would separate financial approval from technical risk review. Grant accepted the change without negotiation. 3 weeks after the audit ended, he and Claire found themselves alone in an elevator after a late meeting. Neither spoke until the doors closed. Grant watched the floor numbers descend. I knew the report deserved an inspection, he said. Claire looked straight ahead. You told me. I keep thinking about why I did not order one. Have you found an answer? I wanted Nolan to be right. The elevator continued downward. Because if Ethan was right, everything became more expensive. Claire turned toward him. Yes. Grant nodded. I mistook the answer I needed for the answer that was true. The elevator reached the lobby. Before the doors opened, Claire said, Do not make that mistake again. Grant looked at her. I will spend the rest of my career knowing I already made it once. The doors opened. They walked in different directions. At Millstone Gardens, replacement work began under independent supervision. Every module arrived with its serial number photographed before leaving the manufacturer. Marcus checked the packaging at the gate. Ethan verified the hardware before installation. A second inspector verified Ethan's records. No single person controlled the entire process. The new system was tested under conditions more severe than the expected emergency load. Portable heaters raised the basement temperature. The grid connection was shut down. Battery demand increased. Medical circuits remained active. The modules stayed within tolerance. Ethan watched the numbers for 6 hours. He did not leave for lunch. Claire arrived during the final hour and stood beside him without speaking. When the test ended, a green line remained steady across the monitor. Ethan finally leaned back. It passed. Claire smiled. You sound surprised. I am relieved. That is not the same thing. No. She looked at the rows of corrected components. I have an offer for you. Ethan glanced at her. I already have a contract. It expires tomorrow. I know. Claire handed him a folder. The title on the first page read Director of Field Integrity for Residential Systems. Ethan read the responsibilities carefully. Independent authority to stop unsafe work. Direct access to the Board Safety Committee, a team of field inspectors drawn from maintenance, electrical, and construction trades. Certification training funded by Apex Current. Formal protection for anyone who reported safety concerns. A hiring pathway for experienced workers without college degrees. He turned to the compensation page. The salary was substantial, not extravagant, not a gift. It matched the authority of the role. You remembered, he said. Your pay reflects the work. Ethan closed the folder. I still do not have a degree. You have the judgment 3 people with degrees failed to use. That is not always enough. No. Claire's answer surprised him. That is why the certification is included. Not because you need permission to be capable, because I do not want anyone using the absence of a document to silence you again. Ethan looked at the green line on the monitor. Who would I report to the Independent Safety Committee? Not you know. He studied her. Claire held his gaze. I changed the structure for the company. For the company, she said, then more quietly, and for more than the company. Ethan understood. Their attraction had existed inside an imbalance neither could ignore. Claire had controlled his contract, his salary, and his future. Now she had removed herself from that authority before asking for anything personal. Ethan picked up the pen. He signed. The corrected system came online on a Tuesday afternoon in early December. Apex Current's communications department proposed a public launch. Claire declined. No stage was built. No banners covered the courtyard. No investors stood beside the controls. Elena Ruiz flipped the activation switch in the Building A basement. The battery cabinets began their low mechanical hum. Hallway lights steadied. The elevators moved smoothly. Emergency outlets remained active during a controlled interruption of city power. Residents watched from open doorways as lights remained on. Mrs. Brooks sat beside her oxygen concentrator. The indicator stayed green. She looked at Ethan. Can I stop staring at it now? He smiled. Yes, ma'am. For how long? As long as the system is maintained correctly. She narrowed her eyes. That sounds like a careful answer. It is. I will take it. That night, Mrs. Brooks slept for 7 hours without waking to check the outlet. Elena sent Claire a message the next morning. No explanation, only one sentence. Evelyn slept through the night. Claire read it twice. Then she placed her phone on the desk and sat quietly beside the old black notebook. Later that afternoon, Claire found Ethan in the Building A basement. He and Marcus were completing the final post-launch checklist. Sophie sat on an overturned crate near the wall doing homework. She had turned 10 2 weeks earlier and had developed the habit of correcting adults when they used imprecise language. Marcus read a temperature from the monitor. 76. Sophie looked up. 76 what? Marcus glanced at Ethan. Degrees. Celsius or Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit. You should say that. Marcus nodded solemnly. You are right. Sophie returned to her worksheet. Claire stood in the doorway. Ethan looked up. The numbers are stable, I heard. Building A is running 2 degrees cooler than projected. What changed? Ventilation adjustment near the boiler exhaust. Claire nodded. We will monitor it through winter. Ethan placed a check beside the final item. Marcus collected his tools. I am going upstairs before your daughter audits my vocabulary again. Sophie did not look up. You said again incorrectly. I corrected your measurement. Marcus pointed toward her. That. He left through the stairwell. Sophie gathered her books. Elena said she has cookies. Ethan checked the time. 1, 2, 1 large one, 2 small ones. Agreed. Sophie started toward the stairs, then stopped beside Claire. Are you coming to dinner? Claire glanced at Ethan. I was not invited. Sophie looked at her father. Ethan sighed. You could come to dinner. Claire smiled. I would like that. Sophie continued upstairs. When her footsteps disappeared, Claire turned toward Ethan. I need to ask you something before dinner. That sounds serious. It is not about work. That makes it more serious. Claire stepped closer. You no longer report to me. I read the contract. I no longer control your salary. I noticed. I have influence over nearly everything in this company except your answer. Ethan smiled. That must be difficult. It is unbearable. The basement hummed around them. Claire took a breath. I would like to have dinner with you when Sophie is not negotiating the menu. Ethan watched her face, not the billionaire, not the chief executive, the woman who had knelt on a dirty basement floor in expensive shoes, the woman who had admitted her company failed, the woman who had risked her fortune because activating the wrong system would have been easier. You are asking me on a date, he said. Yes, I need to speak to Sophie. Claire's expression changed. Of course, she has strong opinions about restaurants. A laugh escaped her. I remember. That evening Ethan told Sophie while they washed dishes. She handed him a plate. You like her. I respect her. That was not what I said. Ethan dried the plate. Yes. Does she like you? I think so. Sophie looked toward the living room where Anna's photograph sat on the shelf. Does liking Claire mean you stop loving Mom? Ethan placed the towel down. He knelt beside her. No. How do you know? Because love does not erase love. Sophie looked at him for a long moment. Then you should go. Why, you look less tired when she is around. Their first date took place at a small Italian restaurant beside the river. Claire arrived without a driver. Ethan wore the white shirt again. Sophie had repaired the loose button with blue thread because it was the only color she could find. Claire noticed immediately. I like the button. My stylist is 10. They spoke for 3 hours. No one mentioned the audit until dessert. No one discussed funding. Claire asked Ethan what he wanted before Anna died. He said he had wanted to open a small repair company. Ethan asked Claire what she wanted before Apex Current became her entire life. She took a long time to answer. I wanted to build something useful. You did. I built something large. That was not the question. Claire looked at him. No. Their second date was simpler. Coffee after Sophie's school concert. Their third involved Sophie because the babysitter canceled. Claire sat in the coal kitchen and ate inexpensive pizza while Sophie explained the rules of a card game no one else understood. Nothing happened quickly. Claire did not buy Ethan a house. Ethan did not become comfortable with her wealth overnight. They argued about security. They disagreed about privacy. Claire learned not to solve every problem with money. Ethan learned that accepting help was not the same as surrendering dignity. 3 months after the system launch, the city experienced a severe winter outage. Ice brought down power lines across eastern Pittsburgh. Millstone Gardens disconnected from the damaged grid. The batteries carried emergency lighting elevators, heating controls, and medical circuits through the night. Ethan arrived before midnight. Claire joined him 2 hours later. They walked through the buildings with Elena. Mrs. Brooks's oxygen concentrator remained on. Jasmine Carter's medical refrigerator stayed cold. The elevators continued moving. Children slept while wind struck the windows. At dawn, Ethan and Claire stood on the roof of Building A. Pittsburgh stretched beneath a pale winter sky. Most of the surrounding blocks remained dark. Millstone Gardens glowed behind them. Ethan held the drawing Sophie had made before his interview. The paper had softened along the folds. Claire looked at it. You kept it. She was right. About what? That I could fix anything. Claire looked toward the illuminated buildings. You did not fix this alone. No. He folded the drawing carefully. But I might not have stayed without you. Claire's expression softened. I almost failed you. You believed me, late, before it was too late. Ethan reached for her hand. Claire stepped closer. For the first time, there was no unfinished report between them, no contract Claire controlled, no board waiting upstairs, no emergency call demanding an answer. Their kiss was quiet, warm, careful at first, then certain. It did not feel like a billionaire choosing an employee. It felt like two people who had spent years carrying everything alone finally allowing someone else to stand beside them. The rooftop door opened. Sophie appeared carrying 3 paper cups. She looked at their joined hands. I knew it. Ethan accepted one of the cups. You knew nothing. I knew before both of you. Claire took the second cup. That is probably true. Sophie stood between them. Below, Millstone Gardens carried 386 households through the final hours of the outage. Lights remained on. Elevators moved. Medicine stayed cold. Medical equipment continued running. Years earlier, Ethan Cole had crossed Pittsburgh in the rain to return a notebook that did not belong to him. He had not known the exhausted woman behind the apartment door would build a company. He had not expected payment. He had simply seen something important and refused to walk away from it. When Claire found him again, he was not looking for gratitude. He was looking for a night shift, a steady paycheck, and enough time to walk his daughter to school. Claire believed she had been given a chance to repay an old debt. Instead, Ethan forced her to see the company she had built without looking away from what it had become. She gave him no rescue. He accepted no charity. She gave him the chance to be heard. He gave her the courage to listen when the truth was expensive. The city slowly returned around them. 1 block at a time, lights appeared across the hills. Sophie lifted her cup toward the buildings below. Dad. Yes, do you still want the janitor job? Ethan looked at Claire. She tried not to laugh. No. Good. Sophie drank her hot chocolate. I did not think it sounded like you. The 3 of them stood beneath the cold morning sky as the power moved back across Pittsburgh. Behind them, the lights at Millstone Gardens had never gone out.